Good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the last in a series of talks about the upcoming Abu Dhabi Art Fair and programs. It's my great pleasure today to be welcoming our guest curators for the exhibition programs at Abu Dhabi Art. And as we only have an hour to go through some really exciting exhibitions, I'm going to jump straight in without much further ado. This will also be recorded for anyone who has been unable to join today to be able to catch up with after. To begin with, as I'm sure many of our visitors are aware, each year Abu Dhabi Art commissions 3 artists from the UAE to create ambitious new work, which is exhibited at the art fair, and we invite a guest curator to work closely with the artists in the realization of these works. It's our great delight and honor to be able to share that this year Galleria Continua has been the guest curator for Beyond Emerging Artists 2024, and that Salomé Zelic, who's with us today, and Lorenzo Fiaschi, who is of course the founder of Galleria Continua, have been working closely with our 3 artists this year toward the creation of their commissions for Abu Dhabi Art. So I'm going to begin by introducing Salomé and inviting her to share a few words with us on, first of all, the beginnings of Galleria Continua and its history as a gallery, and why, in a way, it was so important to bring together artists from the UAE with this incredible gallery. I'd like to invite you, Salomé, to tell us a little bit about Galleria Continua, if I can. Over to you.
Yes, thank you, Dyala. We were very happy to be invited by Abu Dhabi Art this year to curate this program. And as you know, Galleria Continua has been collaborating with artists for over 35 years. So it was founded in 1990 in San Gimignano, in a small, tiny medieval village of Tuscany. And the history started there by 3 friends who met there. Lorenzo Fiaschi is one of the co-founders with Maurizio Regillo and Mario Cristiani. And they opened the gallery in a very unexpected geography. The city first, but also the space, the architecture itself, the building was an old cinema. It is still an old cinema, and as you can see on the image, we kept the architecture for the spectator to be able to read the history of the building in the architecture. So you can still see the balconies, the stage, the curtain even. And you see one of the exhibition that really lasted in the collective imagery is a work by Anish Kapoor, where we literally dig the floor to create this amazing artwork called Descension. So this is the beginning of the history of Galleria Continua, and since then, since 1990, they opened 8 spaces around the world. You see here on the screen images of the spaces, one in Beijing, one in Cuba, Havana, one in Rome, one in Brazil, then Dubai, and the last one that we opened was the one that we opened last October, 1 month ago, in Matignon, in the 8th district. In the next slide, Diala, you can see the image of Les Moulins. And I wanted to talk about this one because about unexpected geography and the sense of scale and space that the founders wanted this gallery to be identified as. Les Moulins is a space that we opened in 2007 outside of Paris in the countryside. So it's not in an art center, and it was a challenge, and it has a very own magic because it used to be a paper factory. And it has this sense of monumentality that is quite unique in the region, and that really enabled very monumental exhibitions such as the one that you see here, which was done by Julio Leparc with a monumental mobile of over 6 meters high. So this is kind of like the history of Galleria Continua and how they created a very unique identity into the landscape of contemporary art. And here in the slide, you can see the image of the gallery in Paris that we opened in 2021, just after COVID. And in this challenging moment, they opened this space in an old leather good wholesaler. And now it's been identified in Paris as a kind of a very vibrant cultural center where you can see exhibition as ambitious as this one of Eva Jospin. But also there is a cafe, there is a bookstore, and it's a very warm space. And it's kind of like the opposite side of a white cube, if I may say.
And I know, of course, you're globally networked. You have galleries around the world, as you've shown us, and each one its own unique space. But you also work incredibly closely with a number of phenomenal artists on commissions and outdoor installations and so on. Could you maybe highlight one or two of those?
Yes, with pleasure. So, for example, the identity of the gallery has always been to bring our artists forward. We wanted to give them a palette and for them to play around, for them to meet the nature, to meet the landscape, and really dialogue with the landscape and make it their own, and create a carved experience for them, but also for the spectator. And for example, this project I wanted to show because it was a very important moment in the gallery's history, but also for the artist himself. So Michelangelo Pistoletto, as you might know, who is an immense artist, Italian, one of the pioneer figure of Arte Povera, was invited by the Havana Biennale in 2014, and he decided to undergo this project and to invite Cuban fishermen to create this shape of the third paradise. The third paradise is a symbol that Michelangelo Pistoletto created to represent the infinity and the meeting of differences and opposition in the world. So it has 3 rounds like this, and the central circle being the meeting and the reunion of opposites. And so in 2014, exactly on the 16th of December, those fishermen gathered and created this incredibly moment, a very fleeting moment of creating the third paradise. And this just lasted for a few minutes, but it was a very important moment for Pistoletto and for the Cuban people as some kind of materialization of their hopes. And coincidentally, the next day was the 17th December 2014. Actually, Barack Obama gave a call to Raúl Castro to reopen the diplomatic relations. So that was a very, obviously, the 2 events are not linked, but it's a symbol of a project that continued really like accompanied for the artists, and coincidentally it created something. It happened at the same moment of something even more important for the world. So this is just an example, and the second example that I wanted to show you is a work that Nikhil Chopra, who is an Indian artist based out of Goa, did in San Gimignano, which is our mother gallery in Tuscany, and how Nikhil, with this installation called Inside Out, really played with the landscape and really like embodied the landscape in this installation. So you see him here being sitting on the valley, looking at the village of San Gimignano, which you can see on the coast, on the line of the mountain, with those towers, those medieval towers, which are like very like the most recognizable fact of San Gimignano. So he painted that on this textile, and then he wore it by walking to the city. So it became his costume. So he became, in a sense, the landscape. In this image, you can see that. So these 2 examples I think, reflect and personalize what Continua has been doing with the artists and the commission that we've accompanied over the years.
Wonderful, thank you. I think that's a good moment actually to turn now to our program for this year, Beyond Emerging Artists 2024. And of course, Salomé, you were very instrumental, along with our friends of Abu Dhabi Art, in choosing the artists that would be commissioned this year. You looked through a number of proposals and pulled out the ones that you found could potentially do something quite exciting together and independently through the fair as a platform. And I wonder if you could tell us what it was about the works, really more on a general level at this stage, that drew you to them, what you found exciting about the proposals.
Yes, so indeed, this moment where Lorenzo and I sat down to look at all the proposal was a very nice moment also in the calendar, which is very like frantic as a gallerist. And this moment of looking at those proposals, which were all very promising, was interesting also to reflect how those works can appeal to us and to appeal to the identity of the gallery. And a few things that now that I'm looking at the three artists that are going to participate to the program, I see that both Lorenzo and we're looking at this sense of uniqueness, of humanism, as well of awareness of the time where we live in. And the three artists, Fatma, Dina, and Simrin, the three of them showcased in their proposal this awareness linked to also an exceptional sense of scale and a holistic vision of what their exhibition, of what the installation were to look like. So even in the proposal, we could see the sense of the narrative that they wanted to create for the spectator. And the three of them had like really strong conceptual beginning and concepts, but they also found a very unique sense of innovative materialization of this experience. So I'm very excited that the audience in the UAE will soon discover those exhibitions and those installations, because they will really transform the space of the fair with a very innovative and engaging experiences.
I think that's the perfect moment to move a little bit more, do a bit more of a deep dive for each of the artists. Perhaps we could start with Dina, and you could tell us a little bit. I know you're reluctant to give everything away from now. Everyone has to come to the fair to see it firsthand, but maybe a little bit of an insight into Dina's work would be wonderful.
For sure. Yes, indeed. I didn't want to show the final stage of what the artists want to create, because I want to leave the experience quite pure also for spectators to discover it. But here are some images of the ongoing process that Dina Nazmi Khorshid went through over the past month to create the installation that is going to be titled Landscape Untitled. So this is an ongoing research that she's been doing over the years. But for the program, for Beyond Emerging Artists program, she really went further in this practice, because she wanted to create a very immersive experience where the audience is going to have a profound experience of this nostalgia and this kind of longing, this kind of longing and the sense of the sense of sorrow that she experienced as a Palestinian-born artist who has herself lived across this sense and all those feelings of longing and of those of displacement. So I think the installation that she's going to create is a mix of sculpture, of photography, and also of textile. So here on the image, you see a large embroidery that she wants to create. That it was the preparatory sketch, and it's going to be a very large, almost 10 meters long textile that is going to showcase a landscape. And the feeling that she wanted to create, she qualified it as a forest-like walkthrough. And with this sensorial experience that the spectator is going to have, you're going to be like dwelled into this feeling of the land that is far, of the land that she longed for. And on a more, like, this is quite monumental in terms of scale, but also on a more intimate side. She, for the first time, she took the opportunity of the program to innovate in her practice, and she created those sculptures of poppy flowers by sculpting them in her palm. So you see here on the left the images of her sculpting the poppy flowers in her hands, and then they become those 48 porcelain flowers representing poppy flowers. And as you might know, the poppy flowers being an indigenous Palestinian flower that you feel in the land, that you instantly recognize from the land. And she wanted to create this almost physical, this connection to the land that she longed for. So this is just a few hints about what she's going to create. There's going to be three. There's going to be those large installation and textile and photography, textile landscapes, and then those 48 porcelain installation.
Perhaps it's a good moment to jump then into Simran's work, which is now in front of us.
Yes. So then Simran Mera Agawan, she, when we looked at the proposal with Lorenzo, she struck us with her sense of scale and the sense of detailed experience and immersive experience that she has created over the years. For example, here on the image, we saw the image of this installation that she had created for the Louvre Abu Dhabi in 2022, 2023. And this is a series that she had started based on the experience of studying sunken war wrecks in the UAE. So she's been herself diving into the underwater in the region, and she's had this experience of looking at those wrecks from a very closed view and gaze, and she saw that those war vessels that are underneath the water, that are lying on the grounds, have become artificial reefs, and they've revived the ecosystem also. So, and those paintings are just experiences, are just like the reconfiguration of those experiences that she's done in the world. And when we saw the proposal, if we go to the next slide, we saw that she wanted to create those immersive installations with those paintings, but also at the center, create a monumental sculpture that will reflect on the sense of growth, decay, and transformation. Yes, here on the image, you see the scale of this sculpture, which is like a massive monster at the center of the installation. Is a very large sculpture of 6 meters long, which will very much impact the spectator in the sense of nature, war, neglect, and what the neglect on nature can create as well. So I think she really managed to bring together the sense of conceptual idea and create and challenge the space and create objects that are gonna make us feel what the nature has become under the carelessness of human histories and wars, basically.
the failures of stewardship as well. I mean, I think between Dina's and Simran's, we're already getting a very strong sense of both artists' connection to land, nature, the environment, which links to your interest in the materiality of the works that they both proposed. Maybe that's actually a nice way to also begin thinking about the third artist that's been chosen for the Beyond Emerging Artists program this year, Fatima. Maybe you could say a few words about her work as well.
Yes, for sure. So Fatma Al-Ali, she is an artist based in Sharjah, and she instantly struck us with, for example, like her whole research has been quite fascinating, but this proposal, this research in particular, kind of struck us with the very unique way she has a very playfulness tone that enable to bring to the foreground complex history of the colonial history of the UAE, and how the British present and the British protectorate really transformed the landscape. So, for example, this project that she had done, which will not be showcased during the fair, but that she had created, is called "It's Not Easy to Persuade Arabs to Do This." This title, only the title gives you the hint about what she wanted to. This is the this is an extract of an archive that she found, that's a historical archive. And this is the base of her practice, was to really delve into those archival material and bring kind of narratives that will give you a hint of those changes that the UAE landscape has undergone. And here in the work before, she found out that the indigenous carrot, which is this purple carrot that you see on the right, sorry, was actually replaced under the British protectorate by an orange carrot. And this is just, so she created this installation with extract of archives, but also she created those drawings with the pigment of the carrots itself. So that was at the same moment playful, but also quite instantly captivating about how the experience of the UAE population was transformed during the British protectorate. And she wanted for the project to delve into this research. So if we go under the next slide, her entire installation is going to be called, titled Once Upon a Time, a Pirate Coast. And again, with the title of the installation, you see how she is going to play out with, she's going to address the colonial propaganda narratives. And she's going to address how the UAE population was fictionalized as being identified as pirates. And this was a very specific moment at the beginning of the 19th century, where the British fleet attacked the Qasimi fleet and identified them as pirates. So this is a very important, this is a very interesting moment to look at, and she brought those archives and she put them on, mirroring here in this installation that we see on the screen. She took the extract, paper clippings from British newspaper, but also local newspaper, and she kind of confronted them. And she confronted on a form that I found really interesting, because she confronted them on a mix of sea sand and desert sand, solidified with sea salt. So everything, the media that she's using is coming directly from the land that is actually being discussed in those archives. So I find how she managed between the concept and the form very interesting. And this is one part of the installation, and then there will be two more, two other installation. I don't want to show you now the images, but it's going to be quite an immersive installation as well. That is going to be some kind of a dune created by a pile of coins, and those coins are not the coins of today. They are the coins that were used along the years of the British colonization of the UAE land. So the Qasimi minted coin was along the years replaced by the Gulf rupee, and then by the Indian rupees. In total, there are 7 different types of currency that have been used, and she's creating this pile of coins that are going to create some kind of a dune from which there is an audio installation that is coming, and the voice that is coming out of those coins is not no one. It's actually the voice of the land and the voice of the landscape that has witnessed all those changes. So these are just a little hints about what the 3 artists, what Fatma is gonna create. But these are just details, and I really strongly encourage you to see those installations. Sorry.
Wonderful. Thank you. No, thank you, Salomé. That's given us so many precious insights and introductions to the work. So thank you very much also for your wonderful support for the artists across this year. I think it is also now then a good time to turn to our next exhibition that will also be at Abu Dhabi Art, a very special one called Otra, Orilla. English translation, Another Shore. And with us today, the co-curator, Odessa Warren, who will be able to share some insights into it. So Odessa, first of all, welcome to this online talk. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for all the incredible research you've been doing. I wonder, just because some of our speakers will not be as familiar with your work and your research, if you could just tell us a little bit about your work in general. I know you're fresh back from a biennale that last week, in fact, that was looking at some very interesting sort of different research, and at the same time that your other work with the Tate also looks at transnational histories, and with your lens on art histories, you know, coming from a very different perspective, if you will, to that of some of our sort of more, if you like, Western narratives. I think it's a really key moment just to reflect on that before we dive into the research you've done for Abu Dhabi Art specifically. So could I invite you to tell us a bit about your wider research and practice as a curator?
Thank you, Dyala, for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation as well. It's been a wonderful experience curating the Gateway exhibition so far and working on this research. A bit about my practice. I mean, I've been associated with, or affiliated, I should say, with a transnational research center. I'm based in London. I'm a curator here. And the purpose of the work, or the mission of our work, is to look at transnational art histories, meaning we are really looking at art beyond the Euro-American canon. And essentially, my work is really interested in telling stories about art, artists, or creative production beyond countries of origin or within the confines, let's say, of borders or nation states. I'm also really interested in working across languages, as well as across different histories. And I think the Lubumbashi Biennale, which we just came back from, I should say the Lubumbashi Biennale is in its 8th edition. The Lubumbashi is the 2nd largest city in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's also its mining capital, so it has these incredibly potent and interesting histories and realities around extraction, and it's the economic capital of that city. And the project was a co-convening between the Liverpool Museum, Tate Liverpool, the International Slavery Museum in Liverpool, and the Research Center at Tate Modern, as well as this collaboration with the Lubumbashi Biennale, which this year the theme was looking at colonial archives. specifically inspired by the work of Valentin Yves Mudimbe, who is a Congolese philosopher. And what few people know is that there's actually a very large Congolese or significant Congolese community in Liverpool, and a historical one. So the work that we did at the workshop in Lubumbashi was to bring some of these archives over and facilitate these workshops that look at the archives critically, but also create these moments of exchange with artistic communities that are interested in these subjects. And we also invited artists working with archives in different contexts, but also looking at these routes, let's say, and navigations, specifically through a critical lens on the colonial archive, whether it's how to intervene artistically in interesting ways in the archive, or whether to actually move away from these archives entirely. So looking at different artistic strategies. And I think that's a really good example of the kinds of curatorial work and curatorial practice I'm interested in. That was also co-convened with Karine Armand, who is the co-curator for this show. So it's nice to continue that work together. And it was also something that a project that we convened in French and in English. So again, working with different languages, which is what we're doing here with Otra, Orilla, across Spanish, Arabic, and English.
That actually is the perfect segue to the exhibition you've worked on for Abu Dhabi Art, which Otra, Orilla. Could you tell us a little bit to begin with about how you came to this research, what your initial findings were, what your, if you like, beginnings of ideas about this? I mean, you've mentioned already that, a lot of your practice is looking at transnational histories, is moving away from sort of center periphery narratives and really thinking about context and sort of south as well, exchange and paths, migrations, and so on. But I'm inviting you really just to give us an overview at this point of what Otra, Orilla will be about.
Thank you. I mean, so Otra, Orilla, or Dafatun Okhra in Arabic, we really decided to focus on the Spanish and Arabic languages, although it does mean another shore in English. I think, again, I mean, anecdotally, as someone from the region, I'm part Lebanese. There is we know that there has been a lot of migration from the Arab world to Latin America, historically throughout the 19th century into the late 19th throughout the 20th and to today. I think historically the research on this subject has been really limited. So it did seem like that there was a really, there was work to do here essentially to tell these stories. And I contributed to a public program, to the program last year of Aya Farid's exhibition at Chisenhale. She's one of the artists in the show. We can speak a bit more about her work later. And I think that project is really looking at that project was looking at the Palestinian diaspora in Puerto Rico. And I think that was a starting point to kind of think as well about, well, what are the other voices and what are the other stories that we can tell, or the artists that are working at this intersection. I think conceptually, the show and how we've thought about it and the curatorial framework for it, I think, we speak about Latin America and the Arab world, but they're obviously not these monoliths. They're in very, complex places and made up of very different countries and contexts. So the idea for the show was not at all to do a historical survey. It's not at all meant to be a kind of a sweeping generalization either. We focused on 5 contemporary artists that have something really interesting to say about these intersections and these connections. And so the idea is to start a curatorial framework or some kind of discourse that can actually read these art histories, make them visible, make them legible, and start this conversation about these connections. And I think what's interesting about this intervention is, again, like what you said, it's a framework that is South-South, and that's also what we try to focus on with the language, to make sure that this is accessible to people in Latin America and the Arab world. It moves away from center periphery, so it's not something that is looking at, what are the influences on this periphery that we can compare to a kind of a European or Euro-American center. And so just to finish on this point, the kind of two tracks, let's say, of how to look at this subject has been through, artists that are reflecting maybe on their own histories of migration, or their own personal stories. Or in general, looking at the diaspora. So quite literally movement, people, etc. Or there have been, there's two other artists in the show that are also looking at it from the perspective of parallels and intersections historically or politically speaking. So those are the kinds of two approaches, let's say, that we've taken, the artists have taken in the show.
Which actually brings us to more of a deep dive into the artists that you've chosen to bring together. And I can see we're starting with Alia Farid's work, so we'd love you to tell us a little bit more about the works that will be shown at Otra Orilla.
Brilliant, thank you. So we're showing two works from that are these rugs and carpets that form part of a larger series called Elsewhere, which was, as I said, first presented last year at Chisenhale. But Elsewhere is a larger project that Alia is continuing to work on. It's a growing material archive that is made up of photos, archival research, interviews, etc., which starts to map the histories of migration from the Arab world and also South Asia to Latin America and specifically the Caribbean. This first iteration has really looked at, or this first part, I should say, has really looked at the Palestinian diaspora in Puerto Rico, which is where Alia is from. She's Kuwaiti Puerto Rican. We're going to be showing two rugs from the series, and the rugs are made in close collaboration with weavers in Iraq, in Samawa, which is in the south. And they depict the architectural landscape of the Palestinian diaspora there. So, restaurants, tire shops, mosques or churches that are these kinds of visual manifestations in the landscape of the diaspora. And it speaks to Alia's interest in the sort of everyday life, or the banalities of everyday life as actually quite significantly politically significant or potent. And I think it's a beautiful work which reveals the kind of more complex, nuanced stories of migration, memory, belonging. So yeah. So these are the two that we'll be showing. Yeah. Yeah.
And then if we could move then to your second artist that you've chosen to include, Francisca Khamis, As Close as I Get. Could you tell us more about this installation?
Definitely. So Francisca Khamis Jacoman is also an artist looking at the diaspora, but from her own positionality. She's a Chilean-born artist of Palestinian descent on both sides of her family. As some of you might already know, Chile has the largest Palestinian diaspora or population of people of Palestinian descent outside of the Arab world. So it's a really significant community there. And her work is really interested in looking at the materiality and ephemeral qualities of memory. As Close as I Get is an installation and performance. We're going to be just showing the installation at Gateway this year. The work is an investigation, or it's part of a larger inquiry in her practice about her connection and her attachment to her family's stone house in Al-Makhrour. Al-Makhrour is a region near Dyala, which is in the West Bank of Palestine. It's a historically agricultural area, and her family's home is still there, although she's unable to access it because of the increase of illegal settlements in the area. So that's why the work is called As Close as I Get. And the 2-channel video, which you can see in the photo, is a documentation of her failed attempt actually at reaching the house. And the floor plan on the ground is actually the floor plan that she recreates of this house. As you can imagine, it's quite a simple house. I think it's a beautiful work on memory, oral history, and tradition, because the video actually includes oral recordings, like audio recordings of her great aunt Labibe, who lived in that stone house, who's now in Chile, who left in 1948 because of the Nakba, but recounts these beautiful stories that she remembers of the home. And so the work and Francisca's practice is really playing and looking into these ideas of memory, present, past, attachment, so on. And we actually are publishing a catalog with the exhibition. And there's a really wonderful interview between Francisca Khamis Jacoman and George Al-A'ma, who is from Bethlehem, who is a historian and who knows the region very well. Bethlehem is right next to Al-Makhrour. And so we have this, it's a beautiful conversation between someone of the diaspora who's from that region and someone who is a Palestinian and still there. And this conversation that they have is really, really interesting and beautiful and generative.
And it's a good moment actually to thank George, because I think he was, one of the first to really suggest we thought about this as a research area, and he's done a lot of research in this particular area himself. I think he has his own archives. Can you tell us more about your conversations with him or how that started?
Well, Aisha, thank you for the introduction, Dyala.
No, more about his role in Chile and so on.
Of course. Well, actually, so George is actually the general consul of Chile of Palestine to Chile or something. So he has a cultural role essentially, which is in Chile, which is to be this ambassador for Palestinian culture and vice versa. So he's really, really instrumental, not only as a art historian of Palestinian art himself, but specifically an art historian of the Palestinian diaspora in Chile, and quite specifically from Bethlehem. So he's also contributed an essay which looks at the histories of migration from Bethlehem to Latin America, with a focus on the merchants actually who left to move to the continent to sell these kinds of religious souvenirs and wares from Bethlehem. So he's been an incredible interlocutor for this project, and the conversation with Francisca is really, really incredible. And actually, they know they have so many familial connections, people they know that they have in common. So I think that was also really nice to see unfold in that conversation and bringing them together.
Wonderful. So the third artist that you will be showing, Ishtar, has done a very moving film as a work that will be included. It's from 2022, My Lost Country. Could you tell us more about that?
Yes. So, again, this is still kind of it's still very much in the realm of, personal archive and memory, but I think these artists are really approaching this subject in a very interesting way. So Ishtar Yasin Gutierrez is a Costa Rican, Chilean, Iraqi artist. Her film, My Lost Country, or Mi País Perdido, is a feature-length film, which we're showing in the gallery space. It's the first time it'll be shown in an exhibition context. Karine and I thought really strongly that this would still work in an exhibition context because the film itself is woven as a series of fragments, poems, images, memories, personal and public archives. And so it doesn't follow any kind of chronology, right? It's a kind of, a woven sort of tapestry of her reflections on exile and the exile of her father specifically. And this still here is actually her own performance. So she also intervenes artistically in the film. But a bit about her story. Her father was an established Iraqi theater director in Iraq who then fled due to the regime, moved to Chile. So fled to Chile, and then during the coup where Pinochet came into power, he fled again. So it's a quite striking story, not only of this idea of like a double exile, but also of sort of meeting similar political conditions, obviously very different contexts, but in both kinds of regions, let's say like in Iraq and in Chile. And so then they fled again to Costa Rica. At the time, Ishtar was a child in Chile when she fled to Costa Rica. So the film looks at histories of exile and through the story of her father, and I think it's a really beautiful poetic look at the subject. So, yeah.
And moving to Emilia's work, which will also be included in the exhibition.
So Emilia Estrada is an artist of Palestinian descent based in Argentina. Well, no, she was born and raised in Argentina, but she's based in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, actually. And I think, I mean, this is one of the works that starts to look at the kinds of, again, the parallels, right, or the intersections. Specifically, her work is really interested in looking at nation-state formation and the histories of occupation and settlement. And she does that looking at her own context as someone who grew up in Argentina, and it's inflected and informed by her own experience and heritage of being Palestinian, right? And so specifically this work, which is called Inland is an Invention from the Shores, it's a series of 9 banners. And each banner represents a municipality across Latin America. So Colombia, Ecuador, Bolivia, Guatemala, Argentina, Brazil, to name, I think maybe there's a few more. All of these municipalities are called Palestina, right? So they're called Palestine. And she came across them as she was looking into her own history and searching for Palestine herself, which she has never visited, or has yet to visit, I should say. And on her, so she was very much interested in like the symbolic repertoires that are embedded within these coats of arms for each municipality. So on the one side, you'll see the coat of arms of each municipality that she's redrawn, and on the other side, a cartographic like interpretation that she's done of the maps and the routes leading to these maps. Because what's interesting is that she went to these towns thinking that she would find some trace of Palestine, right? Some Palestinian families that settled there, or she'd find some kind of connection. She found nothing in the ones that she went to, and when she interviewed people. And her research into public archives led her to understand that, you know, these were towns that were settled in the 19th and 20th centuries by European migrants, European settlers to Latin America. And the reference to Palestine is a biblical one. It's one that references this idea of Palestine within the kind of religious imaginary, and actually has nothing to do with the reality of Palestine or historic Palestine.
And I'm going to have to move on to our last artist simply because I've realized we are running out of time. So, but your last artist, Mandy, has created a special commission for the exhibition and is looking at also the meaning of words, which is interesting in relation to Amelia's work. There's an interesting intersection there, perhaps. But could you tell us more about what she'll be working on?
I'll try and be quick.
Succinctly. Sorry for that.
But there's more information.
I could spend far longer going into all of these works. They're all incredible. The artists that you've chosen.
I should say, I mean, it's all in the catalog if people want to know more. But just really quickly, I mean, this is a commission by Mandy Assayek. She's going to be doing a sort of immersive installation similar to the one you can see in the photo, and she's looking at the intersections and connections of language. So she's really drawing on Frantz Fanon, Mahmoud Darwish, Palestinian poet, and Chilean author Pablo Neruda. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Odessa. I mean, I can't say how much I'm looking forward to seeing these works in real life in a few weeks' time. It will be pretty incredible. An enormous thank you for all this fascinating research and for bringing this exhibition to Abu Dhabi this year. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will then now invite Morad Montazami to join us, who is the director of Zaman Books and Curating. One of the exhibitions that he's recently curated is Arab Presence, Modern Art and Decolonization, Paris 1908 to 1988, which was shown in Paris this summer. He will be bringing an expanded or extended version of the exhibition to Abu Dhabi Art this November, thanks to the sponsorship and partnership that we have now with the Farjam Foundation and Collection, who will be powering our talks at Abu Dhabi Art, but also loaning works from their collection for the purpose of this particular project that Morad has been working on closely. So Morad, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing some insights into this incredible exhibition coming up. I wonder very quickly if we could ask you to, I think for reasons of time, I wanted to first go into some of your incredible research generally with your books and with your other projects. But I think for reasons of time, we might have to deep dive into this really quite seminal exhibition that you had at the Musée d'Art Moderne this summer, and tell us a little bit about the beginnings of that, what drew you to that as a subject, and where your research took you in Paris. So if I could invite you to really start with that, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and thank you, Diala, for your kind introduction. So the exhibition that finished quite recently in Paris in Musée d'Art Moderne, as you explained already, is a historical account of 20th century relationships, complex relationship between Arab modern art and Paris city. So let's say both conflicting relationship and also embracing relationship as part of a colonial and post-colonial art history that to some extent you could say was not yet documented, while everybody knew somehow how important Paris city has been for somehow contributing to modern art history also outside the West, especially through colonized territories. So it was maybe one of the best known subjects, but in a way most little researched or documented, also because it needs to be researched in many different ways. So we're talking about Arab artists who studied in Paris or lived in Paris shortly or longer, or campaigned politically, or sometimes even a brief relationship, but always something relevant or telling in terms of colonial and post-colonial history. So
I think, as you said, it's such an enormous, dense subject matter that one of the ways you decided to frame the exhibition was in 4 different threads or themes or strands, if you will. Is that right? And I think the first one was Nahda, the one we're seeing on the screen right now. Could you tell us a little bit more about that framework for the exhibition and the different connecting threads?
Yes, exactly. So yeah, one way to frame it was that chronological chapters, chronological and topical as well. So the first one is Nahda, between Arab cultural renaissance and Western influence. So we're talking about 1908 to 1937, in which there is a lot also about history of violence and colonial violence and massacres against Lebanese and Syrian occupied territories by the French and the British colonial empire, and also the issue of Orientalism and how local Arab artists will actually respond and transform something about Orientalism in terms of counter aesthetics or counter representations of the Orient, and in shaping also the current conception that we have of what we call the Middle East, or that we renamed West Asia, but also including a lot of nationalists from Egypt or Lebanon, nationalist leaders and independentist writers or activists who met with Arab artists in Paris as well. So for example, in the Universal Exhibition of 1937 with the first Egyptian pavilion, with works of Mahmoud Said and Mahmoud Mukhtar and others that we have in the exhibition as reference to this historical period. And then the second chapter of the exhibition was Farewell to Orientalism, the avant-garde strikes back. So around the emergence of the first avant-garde groups like the Egyptian Surrealists, or also the counter current of a lot of Arab and third world countries, students coming to Paris in André Lotte or Fernand Léger's atelier. It's also the time of the first independence of Arab countries. So first decolonizing movements through Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, and Syria. So this is chapter 2. And also, of course, during the time of World War II, going up until the emergence of Nasser and Pan-Arabism, a movement very much rooted in Egypt and through the figure of Gamal Abdel Nasser, who is referenced also clearly in the exhibition through different types of representations, including socialist realism from Egyptian artists. And then there is a third chapter, which is entitled Decolonization, and it's about the globalization of Arab modernism. So decolonization, modern art between local and global, around the second wave of independence of Arab countries and decolonizing movements. So around Tunisia, Morocco, and Algeria from 1956, also around the time of the Paris Biennale, the Paris Biennale being one of the platforms through which Paris tries to remain a world capital of the arts in a post-colonial context, because at that time, the only country which is not yet decolonized and probably the most important was Algeria, because the Paris Biennale began in 1959 and Algeria was made independent in 1962. But this third chapter features a lot of artists that we know well, like Farel Nissa Zaid, Salwa Rawda Shuker, Ahmed Sharkawi, Etel Adnan, Ramses Yunan, a lot of these big emblematic names and Arab artists who contributed also to movements and platforms like Biennale de Paris or École de Paris, that also faced these identity politics in dialogue with artists from the Arab world. And then finally, there is a fourth chapter in the exhibition, which is Art and Struggle from the Palestinian Cause to the Arab Apocalypse, going from 1967 to 1988. So clearly dealing with political issues of a martyr country as Palestine can be considered, from the 1967 June 67 war that entailed new solidarities and new meeting points for Arab artists through their exile, and also marginalization, because the relation to Paris city was not always a matter of visibility or fame or artistic pride, but on the contrary, could be also harsh in a way for Arab artists to have a real visibility, but at the same time, meeting points and solidarities, contact making with fellow artists from the Arab world or from the third world. At that point, Paris was still a kind of roundabout for this leftist struggle. And Etel Adnan's work entitled The Arab Apocalypse, which is her long featuring poem from beginning 1980s, which she published in Paris, and is almost a kind of prophetic work on the backdrop of all different wars and conflicts, from the Iran-Iraq war to Kuwait to the civil war in Lebanon, and the accumulation of this conflict that also are and crisis of 1973. So there's a whole deal of these political ideas and these political roundabouts or wanderings that existed in and out the Arab world that Etel Adnan catalyzed in a way in her poetry. So we showed a selection of her leporellos from the same time. And this idea of the Arab apocalypse, of course, gives the background for this last chapter and for the overall exhibition. So now we're happy that we can extend to some extent, because obviously it will be smaller. The exhibition in Paris was more than 130 artists and beyond 220 works. So for Abu Dhabi, we have a close-up on the Farjam collection, which has some of these pioneers of Arab modernism who have an intense relationship to Paris. We are happy to show with new works, so with a new content around the same narrative and the same kind of stories of how anti-colonialist groups and anti-colonial spirit also took shape in Paris through these Arab artist networks, we will be able to see another dimension of it with new artworks from the Farjam collection, including Shakir Hassan Al Said, who you can see here, who is probably one of the most experimental painter from that period in the Arab world, going on with the different wars I discussed, or Baya, the Algerian self-taught painter who exhibited at the age of 16 years old in the Galerie Mag in Paris in 1947. So she's also being an Algerian icon in a way that you can also decipher in post-colonial terms, and we will write about it when we show this work in Abu Dhabi in a couple of weeks. And also Mehdi Mutashar in a very different style, who's another Iraqi artist, but who was debating aesthetics and styles related to concrete art, geometric abstraction, and kinetic and up art. So he arrived in Paris in 1967, and his story is very interesting for the kind of aesthetic shock that he felt by visiting the Musée d'Art Moderne in 1967. And then he rarely returned to Iraq, but all his work is heavily influenced by Iraqi architecture as well. So it's definitely another both Arab and general post-colonial response to kinetic art or to Western modernism, but from a different perspective.
So I think, I mean, it's interesting reflecting on, the 3 exhibitions that are coming to Abu Dhabi Art. There really is the sense that artists are the storytellers of their time, reflecting on these stories in visual form, on the materiality of these stories that are brought together, on the importance of artists actually being the voices of each particular time and context, and sharing that for future generations. And I think going back to this very turbulent period with nation formation and post-colonial movements, and then thinking about that in relation to Gateway, where we see contemporary artists that are grappling with some of the, if you like, effects of that today, and then through to, of course, the emerging artists who are looking at it through a very contemporary lens. I think it really, you do see certain threads that tie them together. And just as it's important that these artists are visually leaving that path behind or that map behind for us, it's also important that it's documented and written about, because books, are one of the key forms through which we share this information, these perspectives. And I know that you've worked on a book for the Paris exhibition, and I believe the Farjam Foundation is enabling that book to be translated into English, which you'll be launching also at Abu Dhabi Art, the English version. Can you tell us more about the book that you worked on and what's in that, what you've kind of gathered together for the purpose of that book?
Yeah, thank you so much, Diala, because indeed we're quite excited and happy to present the English translation of this exhibition catalog, which documents, of course, a lot of the exhibition, but specifically brings together a very interesting network of authors, either established academics and writers or emerging new researchers in post-colonial art history. So we're really privileged and really gave the floor to these authors, and as a matter of fact, covering almost all the Arab world between 1908 to 1988 in relation to Paris city. So we are really happy to have authors like Sylvia Neff or Kaylin Wilson Goldie or Claire Davis from the Metropolitan, other researchers and academics like Émilie Goudal or like Mathilde Ayoub. So a very nice group of authors who deal with different times and different countries, somehow in a transnational or sometimes also national perspective, and trying to, again, map out the main Arab capitals throughout the 20th century through all these authors. So yeah, it will be definitely a big time for us to be able to present this book in English in Abu Dhabi, and also to be distributed globally.
Well, I think that is the perfect place to stop. I will invite our guests who've joined us so kindly today to share any questions if they have any for our speakers, perhaps in the chat box for ease if you'd like to. I can see we've got one comment about how excited Tracy has left a comment to say she's excited for all these exhibitions, especially to see Simran's work. But if anyone else would like to type a message or a question in the chat box, we can take some questions now for any of our panelists. So I'll allow a moment for anyone who wishes to do that. I am aware we've run a little bit over on our time. So if there are no questions, which I think there might not be, then I can conclude here. If anyone does want to, send us a message afterwards with any follow-up questions, feel free. For now, it's just for me to say thank you so much to our curators this year for bringing together such an incredible program. We really, really can't wait to see it all come to life for everyone in a few weeks' time. Thank you to everyone again, and we will see you on the 20th of November at Menart Saadiyat, Abu Dhabi, for Abu Dhabi Art 2024. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Decolonization.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.